Hey everybody, Mr. Regan here, and today we are looking at completing part one of our egg drop experiment, where we're going to be talking about introducing what this experiment is all about, how you're going to be brainstorming for this egg drop pod that you're making, and how you're going to be modeling and creating a model for your pod itself. So, today, you are going to be tasked with making a pod out of everyday materials to protect an egg that's being dropped. Your egg pod will be a model that will help us think about how to protect the emergency supplies for our real drop pod. Now, mechanical engineers use models to help test out solutions for problems and to use test results, and they use those test results from their models to improve their solutions to help them solve the same problem. So, your group is going to be completing a series of tasks to help you design, build, analyze, and then redesign an egg pod that is going to follow the same kind of steps that a mechanical engineer would. So, this process will help you decide how to minimize cost, how to minimize cargo damage, and how to minimize pod damage for the pods that we'll be dropping for our disaster victims. Now, the egg that you are going to be putting in your pod, so whatever you build around the egg, will be the perfect tool for measuring how well you minimize the impact forces when a pod hits the ground. The impact forces when the egg collides with the ground is going to be invisible. We can't see it. So, the one easy way to measure whether or not there was a lot of impact force or not is to see how much the egg breaks when it hits the ground. So, in order to understand how to reduce that impact force on the egg, you and your group are going to build a pod around the egg with some of the materials you see kind of on the left. And there's going to be actually many more. Now, as you build your pod, you're going to need to take into consideration the mass and the size of your egg pod. The mass and the size of your pod can greatly affect how much impact force there is. So, scales and boxes will be provided to make sure that you are able to measure how much its mass is and then how big it is to fit our needed criteria. So, for this entire experiment, there are 6 tasks that we're going to be completing, or 6 set of tasks. Today, you'll start number 1, which is the brainstorming. We're also going to be making a rough draft model of what you would do to build, or what your pod would look like if you were to build it. After that, we're going to construct and we're going to do some practice drops, and we're going to have a final draft of your model for that practice drop. Then we are going to, as a class, go and do our egg drop out in the stairwell. And then finally, we're going to do some data analysis. So we're going to collect some data, and we're going to analyze what happened, what worked, what didn't work, and so on. Now, you and your group are going to start with the brainstorming step. To do that, you are going to be given a list of materials and their costs that you are going to be able to use in order to build your pod. Now, as you're thinking about what you're going to do to build your pod, you can only use supplies provided by me, the teacher. You cannot bring in your own stuff. You cannot change the egg provided in any way. Can't hard boil it, can't do anything special to make it more resilient to the crash. The egg must easily come in and out of your device, so it can't be something that's hard to find and look at, so we can, measure that impact force. It can be no longer than a 12-inch by 12-inch by 12-inch box, or 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. The pod is considered successful if no visible yolk to that yellow part can be seen. And then it must be dropped from the topmost rail of the stairs by the stairwell. So, taking those things into consideration, you're going to decide in the first column what materials you see on the left here do you want to use. What is the purpose of this material? So, why are you adding it? What is it going to do to help protect the egg? And lastly, how much are you going to need of it? So, how much of the straws or paper towels or scratch paper, how much of each of those materials are you going to use? Once you know the materials you're going to use, the purpose for all those materials and how much you need, you're then going to go in and model how you would build that pod. Your job will be, number one, to use shapes, lines, icons to help represent the different parts and where and how you're going to build it around your pod. You can also Google images if that makes it easier, and you can copy and paste them into your model. You're going to need to use arrows and lines here, as you see in the modeling directions number 3, to point out what the parts are. So if you're using straws, you need to have an arrow that says this is the straw, or this is the pillow, or this is the whatever you're using. And then last but not least, you obviously need to label those parts. So you'll need to use the text icon that you see here to label all the parts along with where those arrows are pointing. Okay. So take a second and ask yourself, do you understand what the goals for your egg drop experiment are? Do you understand how to complete the next 2 tasks to brainstorm and model your egg pod? If you put your X in yellow or red, reach out. Otherwise, good luck.